Bartail has been one of the persons who's watched all the shows. I talk to him on a regular basis in the EverQuest Next IRC channel.
What we saw with, Kunark for EQ2, you did those 400 quests, you did all the content, and at the end of it, the world wasn't changed.
Yeah, I'm Phantom X. I do social media and write articles for EQ Nexus.
For the Fall of Bastion, there was a very definite, okay, this is where your story is going to fit into the world.
Listen, fluffy looking bear. Thank you. Listen, I went and I killed a dragon, and then 2 drops of whiskey hit my face, and I willed this manly beard into cow was raising. Yes.
Hello and welcome to the EverCast show, episode number 53, which we have titled Umbra-lievable. I think that we've got it up as incorrectly on the show title. I'll have to get that fixed. I think it puts it down as 52, but it's 53, right? Right, guys? Yeah, okay, so this is EverCast, episode 53. We are an EverCast Next and Landmark podcast connecting gamers with the game they play. I'm one of your standard regular normal hosts, Tanlin. With me are the 2 other standard normal regular hosts that show up with me. Flatus is out. Again, he's finishing his move, but I'll give them a minute to introduce themselves.
Hi. Tanlin's wife. Hi, I'm Lucy. I am not Tanlin's wife. That's how you can tell us apart. Because we're like twins. Except she has better makeup. So I just said that it says episode 25. Not even 52.
Wait, on both of my computer screens, it says after episode 52, and I just caught it out of the corner of my eye as I looked over because it should say 53. Unbelievable. And you can, by the way, you can thank Flatus for the name of our shows. He comes up with them even when he's not here, so he loves puns, hence we come up with Umbra-lievable. And obviously, because the latest e-novel is out, which deals with the Tear Doll after they travel into the shadowy realm of the Umbra, we figured we'd talk about that. Trying to focus here a little bit. Before we jump right into talking about the e-novels that have the e-novel that has just been released and what it means for the world of EverQuest's next version of Norath, I thought I'd turn it over to a little bit of ECast news, really quick. I mean the big news is that the Keynos build competition for Landmark has ended, and so it's in the I don't know, because it's not really a voting, it's a selection process for Daybreak, right? They select who the winners are. But for everybody who's out there who competed in the competition, good luck, have fun. Lucy, did you build anything for Keynos?
Oh no! I am not that good. Maybe I could be if, like, I sat down and spent, like, 47 hours watching tutorials and spent all of my free time at swap meets and gathering, like, all the different, like, things that people have created for the... No, the only one of the race builds that I tried to do was the Karens, and I had 9 frames per second while I was trying to build. So after the 3rd time that they switched the material that they wanted the entire build made out of, I was like, this is not for me.
Fair enough, makes sense. So So then the other bit of ECast news that we have, it's going to be one of my favorite subjects. There was a tweet put out by Timothy Lochner on Twitter. He goes by TLock14 on Twitter. And it was a really innocent sounding tweet that got me really, really excited until I came back the next day and he replied. He was like, whoa, you read a little bit more into that than I meant. And it was simply like, hey, what do my Vanguard peeps think about turning the diplomacy sphere of Vanguard into a mobile game? And I was just like, oh my god, that sounds like that's a great idea. And he later clarified that like he was just, that was just, him talking out loud on Twitter rather than a real sincere what would you call it? A survey of interest to see if people were really interested in that. But I think even though he said like there's no in the works or in development or anything like that, he obviously backtracked and said like, hey, I was just talking out loud. Huge potential. If you're not familiar with Vanguard diplomacy, there was no PvP in Diplomacy Sphere. It was all PvE. You went up to an NPC and you started a conversation with them called a parlay. You had your cards, they had their cards. You had cards that gave you different colors. You consumed your colors to take control, and after so many turns, whoever had most control won the conversation. That would be
I have
awesome.
a very important question.
What's that?
Did the colors have a flavor?
Yes, they did.
Really?
Yes, the red, the color red was demand, right? So the flavor, like if you played a card that gave you red, it was basically like an assertional demand type card because it's basically trying to recreate a conversation happening between two different people. Diplomacy, right? So red was demand, green was reason, blue I think was, I don't know. And yellow was flattery, so you could play a flattery card and compliment them, and basically that is how your strategy developed. You basically picked what type of cards you wanted to feed your powers, and then what type of powers that you could use that consumed the tokens that you earned. I'm probably doing a horrible job describing it, but if you can find a YouTube video of it, that is the better way to watch how the game is actually played rather than listening to someone talk about it, because I could take 2 hours and not really convey exactly how it goes.
Also, he's talking about Vanguard, so we should drink.
Oh, right. Good God. Good. Here we go. I'm pretty sure if I was involved with any sort of diplomacy, like, scripting, like if I had to write a game where diplomacy was a thing, I'm pretty sure one option would always be how you doing. That's just what it doesn't even matter like what you guys are talking about. One of the options is just always how you doing.
Yeah, there were some cards that were obviously like an introduction card. Like this is the card that you have in your deck to start the conversation because it's just so generic. Obviously, that kind of up a little bit. Okay.
Because Tanlin says stuff like that all the time. How do you do it? It's true.
My shoes.
Oh! That's one of my favorites. Those pants are very becoming on you.
That's not... I mean, if you want to build like your whole deck with like diplomacy cards that are like
you know
cheesy
Kai is going to come up with a cheesy pickup line card game. Just build your own deck of drunken debauchery flirting. I think it sounds good. Sell it at a bar.
Yeah.
Did you use your wingman substitution deck?
I'm not sure if I've talked about this before, but there was definitely my friends told me about this anime that spoofed like this dating game, and one of the options was always put it in. Like that was it. It was just this. Like it's like, what do you do when you get to a restaurant? Pull out the chair for your lady. Talk to the waiter. Put it in. That's it. That was just one of the options every time. And every time you picked it, apparently you got slapped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had Okay, where's my Tangenalorm siren? All right, so that was just a brief little bit of ECast news that we had. Obviously, the major topic of the show tonight is about the new e-novel, which name is going to escape me at the moment, because I'm put on the spot and I don't have it right here in front of me.
Dreaming in Shadows.
Dreaming in Shadows, right. Okay, so Dreaming in Shadows.
Or something like that.
I'm just going to throw it out here right now. If you're watching on Twitch, if you're listening on Stitcher or iTunes now, and you're afraid of spoilers, I'm sorry, but we tweeted it out. You're going to get spoilers about the story.
Turn off the podcast now if you do not want spoilers.
Right, read the book, and then come back and listen.
All right, bye!
Right, and Kylos has not yet read it. So
Yet implies planning to do so in the future.
So Lucy and I both agreed that this is not necessarily one story, but it's two stories. It's two stories that are entwined into one. It is the story of obviously the Tyr doll in the Umbra realm, but probably more importantly, and more prominently, it's at least in my opinion, it's the story of, and I'm going to butcher the name, so please correct me in Twitch chat so that I know how to pronounce this. Innoruuk. It is the story of Innoruuk and how he ascended into being powerful and what happened to him, and it is the story of his. I keep wanting to call it a mate, but it was not a mating ritual, and it wasn't his wife. It was his dragon that was bound to him, right?
They do call each other soulmate. They call each other like Enzari or something like that.
Right, the Enzari. But it's not like it wasn't his mate, as in like a relationship which they bound themselves in for the purpose of creating offspring, of mating. It was just that they were paired together, and that dragon was Vyskudra, Vic something or other.
Vyskudra,
the black dragon, and obviously way more important of a story in the big picture than just what happens to the Tyr doll, in my opinion, because we learn so much more about the world of Norath in, like, this is going back into the age of what age is it? The age of the Keldorn, or not Keldorn, Keldorain.
Keldorain, yeah.
Because what we learn about is that Innoruuk, who in other EverQuest games, especially EverQuest 2, I find a lot more references to him in that game, is that he is the god of the Dark Elves, the Lord of Hate, the king of them, and he's basically a nasty, evil guy. And so EverQuest Next obviously needs to have their version of that character and in their reboot. And so this is the story about how he comes to be.
And hopefully this will please a lot of Dark Elf players, because I know a lot of people who RP Dark Elves or play Dark Elves really, really wanted to see Innoruuk back in the game. So he's back!
He's back, and I think that they, a lot of times when you just take really abstract oppositional forces like good and evil, it loses some of its meaning, because it's like, I'm good, I'm evil, but in reality, anything that you would call evil is so like bizarre to us. Like, if a whole society founded on the concept of just being evil to one another doesn't look like it would function in the long term. So I love that what they did in this telling of the story is that Innoruuk isn't necessarily evil. He's more chaotic. And a lot of what we see in this new Norath is good, or not good, but order versus chaos, with the mortal realms just being kind of stuck in between. And so Innoruuk, we are introduced to him as a dragon knight after he is bound to Vyskudra, and there seems to be a whole order of these dragon knights. So he's not the only one. It's not a common practice among the dragons to be bound to this and he's not a human, and we'll get to that in a second. He's not a human, so it's not normal for the dragons to be down to this mortal race, but it's not uncommon because there's this whole order of knights that they make a point of talking about the dragon mates.
And letting the books.
It's quite a good read. It gets a little steamy at times.
Are
It's
you
alright.
complaining?
It's
No, I'm not
nothing like
complaining.
my cheese. My cheese porn. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I thought if you guys haven't read the book, and even if you're here listening to the spoilers, read it because I feel like it's got more lore packed into it than the last like 5 books combined.
Definitely more than the ogre one, where with the fall of the ogre city, because it was basically an ogre running through the jungle, running from the elves, and then dying at the end, and the city blowing up. It was like if you wanted to, summarize a book in as few sentences as possible, that's how you summarize it. This one is definitely more involved than that one, and I think that was the last one we got. So the Keldorian and the Dragon Knights. What we know about them, that there are 4 races of the Keldorian Alliance: the Eldar, the Akhevan, the Vora, and the Pridek. And I'm butchering the pronunciation, and I don't give a care, because maybe Dave Reek needs to sit down and have that lecture and everybody take notes, and then they can correct me on saying stuff wrong. But until then, I just pronounce it any way I want to. That's found on page 10 of the e-novel, and I think that it's important because it introduces the Akhevan as a race, and it introduces Innoruuk as a member of that race. But he's not the only race that's a member of this alliance. There's these other 3 that we know nothing about other than that they're in this alliance. And then from there, we go to see that the Innoruuk and Vyskudra are bound together, and they fight in some wars together. And then the turning point of that story is that one of the Seraphs, Solasek, approaches Innoruuk and says that they have found this artifact that gives them godlike powers, and he asks Innoruuk to take possession of this artifact and use its power. And what happens when that happens is that it severs his bond with his dragon, which is crucial. And Lucy and I talked about this before the show. We think that that's the turning point from where Innoruuk is this bastion of goodness and right in the world as this knight. And he's obviously, something happens to him, because when he comes back, he's just an asshole and evil, or chaotic. And Lucy, we talked that there was the bond. They tried to recreate the bond.
Yeah, I think what the severing of the bond is probably what broke Innoruuk, and I think that desperately trying to find a way to get it back led him down this path where he basically embraced chaos.
Right. Because Vyskudra, when we see her again after Innoruuk has basically completed the ritual and now is a Seraph, well, it's really weird, because we thought that the Seraphs were just the 8 Seraphs, but after looking through like the wiki and looking at all the lore, what I found out is that no, there are many Seraphs. The 8 are just 8 specific Seraphs that have bound together as probably like the gods of the Combine. But there's the 8, which are Seraphs, but there are more Seraphs than just the 8. Innoruuk was one of them, not among the 8, but he was basically a Seraph. And after that happened, after the Innoruuk ascended to this power with this artifact, Vyskudra went a little bit crazy-ish. Like she felt like the other dragons are talking with her, and she's saying like, I feel like I've lost a piece of myself, and they recommended to her as like, go to the Sky Shrine and walk the path of order and refocus find your focus. And what we know about the dragons in Norath is that they are the embodiment of order. That Vishan, they call themselves the children of Vishan, and Vishan is the I don't know, not necessarily the god, because like that seems like a diminishment of what their power is, what her power is. Anyway, there's Vishan, and she's this embodiment of all the order, and the dragons are her children. And to walk the path of the order somehow helped Vyskudra find her purpose again in being this child of order. And what we find, Innoruuk didn't have that. Now, it doesn't say what happened to Innoruuk after he became a Seraph. We only see him after he comes back, but I'm speculating that he just went stark raving mad, because he had the same feeling in his soul that the dragon did, and that their soul was torn asunder, basically, and where the dragon had this path of order to recenter themselves in, he had nothing. And so the next time we see Innoruuk, he comes back in front of this huge army of chaos. He tries to get Vyskudra to bond with him again, and she is able to. Like, they've been able to reestablish that bond right before she dies. And most importantly, Nagafen and Lady Vox, I think those were the two dragons in the story that took her dragon soul, the Mither, that we find out about, back to the Sky Shrine to be reincarnated. Lucy's got that face.
I thought it was Yelenak and some other dragon we had never heard of, but I could be wrong.
You're right. It could have been Yelenak. It was basically a dragon. The dragon saw that she had died, and rather than let her die a final death, they took her dragon soul. And again, what we find out is that the dragons are immortal through a process of reincarnation. Like, as long as their dragon soul is intact, they can take it back to the Sky Shrine to be reincarnated in another hatch of dragon eggs. And so the soul the tainted soul of Vyskudra is taken back to be reincarnated, and that's important for the second half of the story.
And they did say something about they were worried that they would taint the other dragons too by bringing her back.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I don't think any of the other dragons necessarily got corrupted, other than the one that she was reincarnated. Do we let the show? Do we let it out of the bag? Do we do the big reveal? Big shocker.
Dun dun dun.
Are talking about the book.
Right. Okay. So the big shocker, the big reveal that they let out in the e-novel is that Ithiosaur, the dragon that chased the Teardoll into the realm of the Umbra, is the reincarnated dragon of Vyskudra, who is corrupted by chaos magic, and the bondmate of Innoruuk. And as cool as that is, that's like the biggest Deus ex Machina. Alice, you got me on this?
Deus
ex Machina. Because it just so happened that what are the chances? What are the coincidences that have to occur? The dragon that was reincarnated with the tainted chaos magic of Vyskudra just so happens to be Ithiosaur, who just so happens to be the dragon to chase the Teardoll through a portal, and that portal just so happens to be to the Umbra, which is where, guess who's there waiting? Take a guess, Kai. You haven't read the story. Can you guess who's there in the Umbra waiting?
On the spot like that.
It's Innoruuk.
It's Innoruuk.
Yeah.
It is all a little bit too convenient. I said before when we were talking that I can kind of, like, if you put me on the spot and I had to say something about it, maybe because he was tainted by chaos, maybe that's why he couldn't just give up the fight and he couldn't let it go. He had to have his vengeance. Maybe that's why he did something rash and silly, like follow them through the portal. Maybe because Innoruuk was his soulmate in that sense. Like, he felt like this pull towards the Umbra, and he just went. But it's all a little convenient.
Very convenient. And see, that's the thing, is like, it was not, like, it would make a little bit difference if Ithiosaur chose the portal. Because then it would be like, oh, you know, the dragon subconsciously he didn't know, but he felt like there was a calling to go through this portal to this other plane where Innoruuk was. But it didn't happen that way. It just so happened that the Dark Elves were the ones that opened the portal. And so, like, they have no connection to Innoruuk yet.
Or do they? Because Caramore's necklace that was passed down through his family was the one that opened the portal to Umbra.
You know, and I think that was one of the things that I had put on my to-do list, was to go back and check that story to see if it talked a little bit about where that necklace had come from. Because you're right, it would make a lot more sense if there was some chaos magic of an unidentified origin attached to that necklace, and then we find out that it was like, you know, it's like the one ring it knows how to get home.
Well, and let's not forget that Innoruuk is a god. I mean, he's godlike in his powers. Perhaps he set up something like a chain, like a string of dominoes, where he like set things in motion that eventually, you know, cascaded down into whatever. I don't know. I'm reaching. I really am reaching. I hope that they explain a little bit more why it was so convenient that Ithiosaur just happened to follow them through the portal and find himself in Umbra.
Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense, especially if you look at it from the way that the necklace can open a portal. Big deal. But it just so happened that Innoruuk knew how to get the Tear Doll to the portal to his realm, and it was like, okay, all I have to do is make sure that the easiest path of retreat for the Tear Doll is to go to this portal. And then it's like, then he's like, okay, I made the path. All they have to do is run the most logical course of escape. And it just so happens to take them to a portal, and they just so happen to have a key to open the portal to go into their realm. And then he's like, oh, well, and it's just, well, this is really convenient. Ithiosaur followed them. Perfect.
Or somehow Caramore's necklace is just keyed to the portal, but it was Ithiosaur's presence that actually opened it to Umbra. Maybe the portals go to different places. Like, right. Each portal can go to a different place. It just happened to pick Umbra for a reason, that because chaos magic was near in Ithiosaur.
Yeah.
We're totally just doing their job for them now.
Oh, yeah. But I again, like I said, that was just like, as I was reading through the story and looking back at it, it just seemed like the biggest Deus ex machina. I got the nod from Kai, I said it right. The biggest Deus ex machina of the story was just like, it just so happened that everything fell into place, and wow, awesome. Now we have Tear Doll, and now we have Ithiosaur reconnected with Innoruuk in the Umbra. We had one question before the show started. I'm going to ask it again to start a little bit of discussion. There are the other creatures, the other race of sentient beings in the Umbra. I'm just going to call them Umbran for now. They have four arms. They have 2 pairs of arms. They crawl around like insects. They have horns. They have chitinous armor. There's more than one reference in the novel that they appear like insects.
And I believe Ithiosaur mentions a couple times that they have weirdly reminiscent elf-like faces.
He did say that, and I'm like, and that's what I was trying to put the create in my mind what these creatures would look like, and I'm like,
I came up with Driders every time. Like some sort of weird Drider thing.
You went the same place I did. I was like, I wonder if this is like a throwback to the Driders of the Drow. Basically, when Locke cast out the drow that followed her. She basically turned them into driders. And I thought I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking that they basically crawled around on two sets of their limbs and had insect-like appearance from the head up, and then they had the face of an elf to basically make fun of the fact that they used to be this other race. So the question that we had is that we know that Innoruuk, and he was an Akhevan. That is without question. You want me to source it in the novel? I've got 2 pages where it mentions that he's an Akhevan. We also know that he only has 1 pair of arms. But what happened to the Akhevan, and are they the corrupted creatures that we find in the Umbra? That is the question. And if they are the corrupted creatures in the Umbra, why do they now have 2 sets of arms? I mean, the obvious answer is chaos magic. Woo!
And did they have horns before? Because I don't think Innoruuk did he?
Yeah.
Oh, he did, okay.
I
wasn't sure exactly how much they twisted, but I think they grew the insect skin or chitin, and I think they also grew the extra set of arms, which is a little weird.
That page of the novel that you pointed me to that tells that describes the statue of the dragon rider, and it says that it's he looks just like the Akhevan, except he only had 1 pair of arms, but they specifically mentioned the pair of horns. So that's, you and I both went with the same thought, and we don't know why we think that. It's just our feeling is that these are the Akhevan that have been corrupted through magic, living in the Umbra, and they look nothing like how they did 10, 20,000 years ago. And I'm actually, and then the other thing is that if you look at EverQuest 2, there are some Akhevan now in EverQuest 2, and it seems like it has to be a new to EverQuest 2 because of the level of these creatures. Because, I mean, level 102 and level 102 creatures sounds like they're new to EverQuest 2. So I'm going to throw up a couple of pictures of the Akhevan from EverQuest. This looks like EverQuest 2 art, and then this one looks like EverQuest 1 or maybe EverQuest 2 art that are the Akhevan. And you can see in this picture they're definitely corrupted. They don't look like you would expect the elf-like beings, but they have enough of it to see the semblance. They have the 2 pairs of arms and the horns in both pictures. So
I think they got corrupt over time.
I do too.
Because they were definitely a lost race. That's what Karamor was thinking, that they were a completely lost race, and they'd been gone for ages, and to a tier doll. I mean, with such a large lifespan, that's a long time.
And I think it was the feast that actually did it for me, is that because Innoruuk could create the illusion that the feast that they had in the city in the Umbra, he could have created the illusion for them to look any way that he wanted, because he made them look, fancy clothing and beautiful artwork and magnificent buildings and wonderful food, and this race of creatures that were beautiful and had 4 arms and a pair of horns, and he could have easily have made them look a bunch of different ways, but I think that he made them look like how the Akhevan would have looked 10,000 years ago, except he just wanted to keep the 4 arms because, the obvious thing is that in human mythology, we see 4 sets of arms like the Shiva and the demon women creature type stuff.
That's 2 sets of arms. 4 arms, 2 sets.
Right. I almost pulled up a picture of the Shivari from Warcraft, but then I noticed that they have 6 arms. They have,
Yeah, the Shivari have multiple sets. 3 sets, 4 sets.
But that was what I'm thinking, that both games are looking at the same mythology and drawing from it from the same way to create a race in a fantasy game.
Indian mythology.
Yeah. And I think it works. It works in this context, except for, like I was saying, the Deus Ex Deus, 2 syllables, not one. Deus Ex Machina. Except for just making it just so coincidentally all happen and follow. But again, you have to have a little bit of that to tell a story. So what else do we learn from the story of Innoruuk? The War of the Plague, where Vyskudra actually, her physical body dies and her soul is taken away to be reincarnated. There's a name that is mentioned that Innoruuk is serving.
Lamashtu, the Queen of Lies.
There we go. That's.
You didn't even have to pronounce it. I did it for you. I saved you.
All right, and that again is not a name that has been mentioned in EverQuest Next lore that we've come across so far. It's a new name to us, right? And so, like, getting ready for the show, I did a quick Google search for it, and that name, Lamashtu, it exists outside of fantasy gaming. It's a real name of a Mesopotamian mythology figure. And I'll pull it up right here. Lamashtu, a female demon monster, malevolent goddess or demigoddess. So other than her little brief mention in the story that is who Innoruuk is serving, she hasn't been talked about before since. But the reason why I think that this War of Plagues is connected to other events is because the name of or actually they don't even call it the War of the Plagues. I'm calling it the War of the Plagues. The name of the chapter that battle occurs in is called Plague. That's it, nothing more. Plague. And if you go to the EverQuest Next wiki, it talks about the War of the Plague, which happens in the era after the era of the Kaldorian, and there's a different figure who is mentioned, and that's, I'm gonna pull it up here because I'm gonna butcher this name no matter what I do. Bertoxxuloust. That is like, this is what I was talking about before the show. Like I went down the rabbit hole, and this is where I was like, oh my god, there's all of these nuggets of information that are on the internet that haven't been put like into the wiki. So I'm going to pull up that webpage real quick so that you can see that I'm not just like making this up or pulling it out of my ass. Moorgard is talking about this came in the aftermath of the War of the Plagues, where these Seraphs became determined to ensure that no single god could gain control over influence over Norath, as Bertoxxulous tried to do. Okay, no mention of Lamashtu, and a mention of a different person. I'm just going to call him Bert. Does that work for everybody? Bert? We'll just call him Bert?
Sure.
All right. So I wanted to tweet out to maybe Domino or to Josh about, like, did they change the name of these characters? Is now the Lamashtu the same character as Bert, or are they separate creatures? But I didn't want to spoil it. I'm going to probably wait another week or two before I ask that question. So, yeah, there's this Bert, and then there's Lamashtu. Lamashtu, they call her the Queen of Lies, and she seems like an embodiment. She's a powerful figure in the army of chaos, and the dragons being very powerful figures in the army of order, and they conflicted. And the battle, the war that was fought between these two powers was called the War of the Plagues. And I'm only speculating that is the event that they're talking about in the e-novel, and the only connection that I'm drawing from that is because, like I said, the name of the chapter is called Plague, and the name of the war in the wiki and on the forums that Moorgard posted on is called the War of the Plague. So I'm just saying Plagues, War of the Plagues, putting them together, and that's what I had. Like, and it also makes kind of sense time frame wise. because it was after the era of the Kalderain, and it's they call it the Lost Era. So it's after those beginning 4 races had started in the Kalderain Alliance, and then they whatever happened to them, and then there's the Lost Era as the other mortal races of Norath are starting to rise to power in the aftermath of that. So we have no elves or gnomes or dwarves or anything like that yet. I don't know, that seemed like down the rabbit hole as far as I wanted to get, because then Lucy and I were talking about they called the Seraphs that the Combine worship the 8 because in theory there's 8 of them, but when you actually do a count there's 9 of them because who is it? Lucklin and the other one. They're the 2 fates. There's actually 2 of them, and we didn't know if they had been merged together. There's a D in there, DRAN something or other. I know that Lucklin is one of them, and she's the mother, and her daughter is the other one. Anyway, I can't find it right off the top of my head, but we were having a conversation. Does that mean, because the Combine worships these Seraphs as the 8, the quote-unquote the 8, does that mean that Lucklin and her daughter are merged into one god somehow, or if there are actually 9 of them and they call them the 8 because you combine the 2 of them and worship them together? I really don't know.
I don't know.
Does it matter, do you think?
Apparently they're a pair and they're a package deal.
Yeah, that's what, if you go to the wiki and read it, says that you can't worship one without worshiping the other because it's a huge affront to their belief, the way that they the way that you serve the 2 of them is together and not one separately than the other. And in Greek mythology, there's 3 fates, right? So it's interesting that in Norath they chose to have the same fates represented by 2 women, or by a pair of women or a set of women, but 2 instead of 3, because in Greek it's past, present, and future, right? And in Norath it's just the past and the future. There is no fate of the present.
I will be interested to see how many more mortals or, races of Norath took up these artifacts that created the Seraphs, and how many more, are they good? Are they neutral? Are they evil? Because it was specifically stated that the 8 that the Combines serve, I guess, worship, are not good or evil. They are just, for example, Erolisi, I think that's how you say her name, Erolisi, or Erolisi, depends on where you're from. She is the goddess of nature and harvest and things like that. But nature goes through cycles. Nature grows, nature dies. So it's like 2 sides of the same coin, and they very much stressed that during one of the panels where they were talking about the 8 originally. And now we meet Innoruuk, and he's so off the rails from that. I mean, he is literally I will own the world. It will be mine. I don't care. I will crush everything. And I'm interested to see how many more of these Seraphs there are, what kind of personalities they have, what kind of powers they have, and whether or not, as player characters, we will be able to serve them or serve their goals.
Yeah, and it was at one of the panels at SOE Live, and I think it was Jeff Butler that mentioned it. And the obvious example that I always go to is Nathaniel, who is not, if you look at him from an evil light, he's the god of war, but if you look at him on the other side of that same coin, he's the god of honor, which might drive people to go to war. So yeah, it definitely. I love that they presented the 8 that are the Seraphs that are the 8 of the Combine as not two-faced, but they're dual purpose. There are shades to their character which might look good or evil depending on how you want to look at it. And again, like you said, I thought that was one of the best parts of what they said about the Seraphs. And then I think that it's actually a good idea to throw in other Seraphs that exist outside of the 8 that don't fit into that nice portfolio where you have Innoruuk, who's been introduced, who is purely an agent of chaos at this point. He wants to rule all of Norath, and he is hell-bent on doing that. Which makes me wonder if have we met any Seraphs, or will we meet any Seraphs that are on the opposite end, that no, I do not serve a dual purpose. I am a Seraph of order, and I demand everything to be organized, and there be no variation from the right noble order of the world. Because that could also be just as... it conflicts with human nature, right? We're a little bit chaotic, we're a little bit orderly, and so like
we have ordered chaos.
Exactly, and so I think that again, where you can look at the different shades of gray, is that like a being of pure order that is a Seraph would be, like humans would be like, no, you're driving us crazy.
I think it's kind of like I'm not sure if you guys watch a lot of the like angel demon type shows that are out there, where the angels are like agents of order and they're supposed to care for humankind, but they really don't have the capacity because they don't have free will. So they basically just like follow the rules to the letter of the law that has been passed down to them. And the dragons kind of remind me of that, like the Sky Mother gave them this order to look after the children of the Norai, the Earth, the Earth Spirit, which are the mortals. But they're like, we don't know how to do that. You didn't give us specific instructions. So they're kind of like fighting amongst themselves the best way to do that. I mean, not like war fighting, because they're forbidden to kill each other, but they're very much like they don't know how to interpret their rules because they are such creatures of order. And having unnaturally long lifespans also makes them extremely hard to make a decision. Kind of like Ents. You're like, come on, just pick something. But they can't.
Right. And I think that's a very... there's a good comparison to make about the Ents from Tolkien, because there's a quote from Tolkien, because it's like, I'm on no one's side because no one's on my side, is their line. So that they can very easily just detach themselves from the affairs of mortals, because they're like, this has nothing to do with me. You guys aren't on the level of thinking that I'm on, type stuff, where the dragons are concerned about the balance of power in the universe between order and chaos. And so like when two kingdoms of men and elves go to war together, they're just like, what do we care? The only time that they really ever cared is when the elves decided to go to war against the dragons and started slaying them, and I think that now looking back, knowing that we know that the dragons can be reincarnated, I think that tells us a little bit more about why the dragons were so upset that the elves were hunting them down to experiment and kill them, because of their ritual for rebirth. It was like, if an elf kills you, you don't know how, like if an elf kills a dragon, the elf does not know how to take care of that dragon soul so that it will be reborn. So like they die a final death simply because there's no one there to take that spirit back home so it can be rebirthed.
Basically, they were just being dicks.
Well, yeah, because they're elves. Elves are kind of that way.
And I still want to play one. I have a feeling that centuries of slavery and servitude have broken their spirit a little bit, maybe given them a little humility and less arrogance. I can hope. They're not going to give me fairies to start with, so I have to play something.
Well, it's going to be halflings.
Excuse me?
There may be halflings. You can play
One
halflings.
short beast is not the same as the others.
Okay.
Halflings, pies, fairies, glitter.
Second star to the left.
It's true.
Straight on till morning.
And gnomes are obviously inventions. I mean, come on.
Right, but from previous conversation, I don't think the gnomes are going to be a playable race in the Combine. either they're not going to leave Kunark after the combat line leaves, or as soon as they get back to Emerald, I think that the gnomes are like, peace, we're out. We're going to go back to our ancestral homelands, and we don't need the Combine anymore, that type of stuff.
Maybe they created flying ships and they just live on those.
Floating City would be kind of cool.
Please, guys, please make it happen. Just steampunk flying ships everywhere, please.
I don't want to hurt you. Okay, sure. Lucy said please. She said please at least 3 times. That's got to mean something.
That was more like almost 5, or right at 5. Maybe more.
I'm begging you. How cool would it be to fight dragons on a steam-powered airship? Like ballista.
I don't want to kill
catapults. Fine, then wyverns or drakes or griffins or other things that fly that aren't fairies.
Why not fairies on skyships?
Froglocks launched from cannons.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think that the elves by their character are going to be arrogant and aloof for all of eternity. I don't think that they can ever be like undone from that. It's just like, oh, you're an elf. That means you're arrogant. You believe yourself superior to the other races.
I'm gonna play an elf that was abandoned and was basically raised by pixies or fairies or something, and is just happy, sparkly. Gonna do it.
Okay, there was one question. I was going to answer this question before we turn it over, because the second hour after we come back from break, we're going to talk about the Tear Doll, specifically about what happened with them in the Umbra, because as we had said, there's 2 different stories of this in this story, and the more prominent one, the more important one, in our opinion, was the one dealing with Innoruuk. But question from Legendary Neurotoxin: was there only one age in history where dragons would bond with mortals, and if so, what age of history is that at? I think that for when the dragons were bonding themselves with the Keldurain, it was obviously during the age of the Keldurain, or the era of the Keldurain. Do you think that I think that ever since then, especially after the Dragon Wars, the dragons were just like, nope, not doing that anymore, never again. Which means that they probably could if they wanted to, but I think that they learned their lesson. That
I think we don't know what happened specifically to Innoruuk because we saw what happened through Vyskudra's eyes, and she wasn't there. But I think the dragons kind of figured out what happened to Innoruuk, and were like, maybe it's best if we don't do this anymore, because mortals can't handle it. And honestly, neither could Vyskudra. She had to put herself into solitude for like 1,000, was it 1,000 years? 2 centuries? I don't know, a long time.
It was at least a century where she had to walk the path of order to stare at the pattern to regain her sanity. And I think that you're right. That Vyskudra makes one other comment during the bonding where she tells Innoruuk that, like, I will be bonded to you even after your death, and it was basically a reference that she's not only long-lived and will most likely outlive him should he not die in battle, but she is a dragon and therefore probably immortal, and that she recognizes the fact that she might be. And I think that was what we learned, is that even after they reincarnated, they're still bonded to that person. So the loss of that person that you're bonded to from a mortal race, it's like the dragons just can't handle that.
I definitely think, especially after Vyskudra had to lock herself away, basically, that the dragons kind of were like, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore because it's bad for everybody involved. Though they made a great pair. Like, I mean, the Dragon Knights in battle seemed to be, I mean, they were the front lines. They were really well suited for that, at least.
See, the thing is that, and that was the other thing, I haven't really even talked about it, but I love the idea of knights riding around on the backs of dragons flying into battle. That sounds great. But but examining the Norath dragon and a mortal race, there's just such a different. What really do the mortal races bring to the power? What power do they have to bring to the show? As far as we know, Innoruuk had none of that. He was just a guy in a suit of armor, and I was like, that seemed like the disparity of power just is so great that why does the dragon really need the be bound to this human? It just seems like it's such an imbalance of power that there's no reason for it.
There is one thing that the book did specifically say, or Vyskudra specifically said, is that she learned how to lie.
Oh yeah,
she was able to lie. So it might not have just been necessarily like power, because they were technically a weaker race, but they brought a lot of, like, I think, spirit, like a lot of things that the dragons couldn't do or didn't know how to do, or just was so alien to them that I don't know. I think it freed her to be a little bit more, I don't even know, wild, I guess I want to say.
No, and I think she also mentions that she felt whole with the human soul bound to hers, and I think that was more of a testament that when you're a creature of order might make you feel OCD at times, and adding a little bit of that chaos in might kind of level you out so that you can see what the rules are and what the patterns are, and then see patterns, because now you're not bound to just being an agent of order. You throw a little bit of chaos in there so that you can think outside of the box. So I can, but I don't know. That seems a bit far-fetched comparatively. Maybe.
I think it's a definitely a perspective thing. I think that the dragon had because she's like, I think this is the path that Vishan wanted us to take. I think they wanted us to bond with humans so that we could feel what it's supposed to be like. I think that they are incomplete by themselves, because you can't be an extreme and function. I mean, all the way on one spectrum or all the way on the other spectrum. I mean, obviously, Innoruuk is like batshit crazy and he's not really functioning very well at all. But I think the dragons need that just little bit of spark to just make them a little bit more creative, a little bit more interesting,
That's the word I was looking for. Creative. The agents that live in a completely ordered world have no creativity, and it was adding in that bit of chaos allowed them to be creative. And you need to be creative in order to lie, because you have to be able to think of how to deceive, and how is this going to be a believable deception. Right, so we're right at the hour mark. I think it's time to go to a break and then come back and talk specifically about the Tyr doll and what happened with them in the story. There's 3 break videos. I picked out 2 of them. They deal with the Tyr doll. One of them is just a video that shows Neriak from EverQuest 2, which is the homeland of the Dark Elves in EverQuest 2. The second one is a composed piece done by Andoran. Andoran he's been a guest of the show at least once, maybe twice, but he creates music for... He did the introduction to the show when you listen to it at the beginning. That's him. Okay, so that's who he is. And he did this piece that talked a musical piece inspired by one of the battles of the Dark Elves. And then the third one, I'll let Lucy introduce, or do you just want to, give him a little bit of shock and awe?
Prepare yourselves.
Okay, so 2 videos.
That is all.
And then a third one. Who wants to camp us out?
You were not prepared?
Kai, you should camp us out since you've been relatively quiet this evening.
Sorry. Are you complaining? You usually complain that I'm loud.
I just pointed it out. I'm not complaining.
Lucy!
No comment! I didn't say it!
I saw it! I saw those eyebrows. Like, what? Camping in 5, 4, 3, 2,